Good day and gratitude, family. This is Face the Nation with Bolden Unchained again, and we're back again with another reading of Racial Violence in Kentucky, 1865 to 1940. And I would like to thank everyone, for doing what you do, whatever you do, wherever you are. I want to thank you for keeping your head up, because I know it's tough out there, and it's finna get tougher. But yeah, just keep your head up. Keep your eyes on the prize. Everybody else is. I have this video I want to share with us first before we begin our reading tonight.
And I stopped at this Denny's to grab a coffee because I'm addicted to caffeine. I went in there to get my coffee to go, and then I walked to the bathroom. But as I'm walking to the bathroom, it's this old guy sitting to the left with about 12 people that's celebrating his 89th birthday. I got a call from my dispatcher, and he was like, yo, you can chill, no rush. They're not ready for the freight, so you can relax a little bit. Sat down, ordered some food, so now I'm sitting like across from the guy that's celebrating his birthday. Time goes by, I'm down there at the end of my meal, and everybody that basically came to celebrate with him had left, so now it's just him and his wife. So as I get up to go wash my hands, I see him and I give him a smile. I'm like, happy birthday, young man, 89. That's a lot of memory to have. Here's the thing. I don't even know why I said that. He could have had Alzheimer's. I'm not even sure what I meant by that. But that's what I said. And he said, well, thank you, young man. And he smiled and he kind of just stared at me, and I just walked back there and washed my fucking hands. So I come back and his wife is gone. She's talking to some other lady that goes to the same church they do. And he sees me, he says, come here, come here, come here. And I said, yes. And he said, there are way too many things that I wish I could forget. And I said, yeah, man, you make it to damn near 100 years old. I'm pretty sure you got a handful of regrets. And he looked at me with the most serious look ever and said, you have no idea. Well, now I'm curious. Do tell. He said, I used to be a firefighter through the 60s and 70s. I said, that's what's up. That's a very commendable job. And he said, yeah, it should be. He said the 60s and 70s was a different time in every way possible. You know that, right? And I'm just like, yeah, no shit. He said, back in those times, I was a way different man, and who knew that we'd get to the point where we are in society today, and I'd be feeling the way I'm feeling about the decisions that I made back in those times. So I'm like, man, if you won't fucking tell me, bro. So right before he took a very long pause, he looked at me and said, back in those times, it was very common for
Take
firefighters
this
that
out.
looked like me to leave people that looked like you in burning houses and buildings and horrible situations just to say they couldn't get to us. He said more times than he'd like to admit, he would hear screaming black people and children in burning buildings and houses and apartments and stores and
Just
cars,
act like it.
and he would literally just pretend he didn't hear it. He said his last time doing it was when he made eye contact with the baby that he deliberately went into a building to save and deliberately didn't. And he said that was the last time he did it, and he quit that year. He said the nightmare still hasn't stopped. He still hasn't forgiven himself, and therapy helps, but it's still a living nightmare to have those memories. And I guess that shit just shocked me so much because when it came to firefighters, I never thought of them like that. Like when it came to like police officers, lawyers, and judges, and everybody else, we knew they didn't give a fuck, especially police officers. We knew they didn't give a fuck about us. But I don't know why that didn't click to me that no, it was everybody that hated us. Everybody. Everybody had a hand in deliberately making
And
our
that's what
lives
I'm
worse. So when I
saying to
calmed
us.
down from being mad enough to want to pull the plug on his ass, I thought about it. I thought about it, and I was like, of course they did this. Of course. Of course they did this shit. Duh. Like, why was I even shocked? Like, of course. But it is something that I cannot think about for too long because that visual of you fake going to save
Leaving
somebody
a
and not
baby
saving
in
them
a
because of the color of their
fire.
skin and the entire 911 understanding because, oh yeah, you couldn't get Jamal. Oh well, just another one.
I just want to come back and say that, you know, everything that's being revealed right now, everything that's being revealed right now is by divine Divine's timing. And all of the people that's coming forward with their racist ways and thoughts, them nightmares that's eating them up because of how they've done black bodies, how they have used and abused and neglected, willingly, deliberately denied, refused to rescue a black baby from a fire. And I bet you he's the sweetest white man some black people know. And that's what I'm saying to us. A lot of them, more than a lot of white folk, can be sincere in their sympathy for themselves, because they know it's over for them, because they know they got an answer for all that karma. It may come off like the illusion of inclusion, like we all one, we all gonna fight this together, but no, we not. We ain't fighting nothing together. Everybody fighting us. Everybody and their mama is fighting us. Let's get back to this video right here, because you know how I feel, and I'm on my ancestor side. Let's not get it twisted. We know whose side I'm on.
Sat down, ordered some food, so now I'm sitting like
I'm sorry, y'all.
from being want to go like that shit.
Good morning, y'all. This morning I'm very much bothered, and
well, hell, ain't nobody here but me.
He said more.
I
said
go
that
back
he could have had Alzheimer's. I'm not even sure what I meant by that.
If you're listening,
but
you need
that's
to
what
hear
I
this.
said. And he said, "Well, thank you, young man." And he smiled. And he kind of just stared at me, and I just walked back there and washed my fucking hands. So I come back, and his wife is gone. She's talking to some other lady that goes to the same church they do. And he sees me. He says, "Come here, come here, come here." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "There are way too many things that I wish I could forget." And I said, "Yeah, man, you make it to damn near 100 years old. I'm pretty sure you got a handful of regrets." And he looked at me with the most serious look ever and said, "You have no idea." Well, now I'm curious. Do tell. He said, "You know, I used to be a firefighter through the 60s and 70s. I said, "That's what's up. That's a very commendable job." And he said, "Yeah, it should be." He said the 60s and 70s was a different time in every way possible. You know that, right? And I'm just like, yeah, no shit. He said, back in those times, I was a way different man, and who knew that we'd get to the point where we are in society today, and I'd be feeling the way I'm feeling about the decisions that I made back in those times. So I'm like, man, if you won't fucking tell me, bro. So right before he took a very long pause, he looked at me and said, back in those times, it was very common for firefighters that looked like me to leave people that looked like you in burning houses and buildings and horrible situations just to say they couldn't get to us. He said more times than he'd like to admit, he would hear screaming black people and children in burning buildings and houses and apartments and stores and cars, and he would literally just pretend he didn't hear it. He said his last time doing it was when he made eye contact with the baby that he deliberately went into a building to save and deliberately didn't. And he said that was the last time he did it, and he quit that year. He said the nightmare still hasn't stopped. He still hasn't forgiven himself, and therapy helps, but it's still a living nightmare to have those memories. And I guess that shit just shocked me so much because when it came to firefighters, I never thought of them like that. Like when it came to like police officers, lawyers, and judges, and everybody else, we knew they didn't give a fuck. Especially police officers, we knew they didn't give a fuck about us. But I don't know why that didn't click to me that no, it was everybody that hated us. Everybody. Everybody had a hand in deliberately making our lives worse. When I calmed down from being mad enough to want to pull the plug on his ass, I thought about it. And I was like, of course they did this. Of course they did this shit. Duh. Like, why was I even shocked? Like, of course. but it is something that I cannot think about for too long, because that visual of you fake going to save somebody and not saving them because of the color of their skin, and the entire 911 understanding because, oh yeah, you couldn't get Jamal. Oh well, just another one gone. Like that shit.
Good morning, y'all. This morning I'm very much bothered, and I think by the end of this video, y'all gonna be bothered too. Last night I watched a TikTok, and there was this young man, and he said he went into a restaurant, and there was an older white man celebrating his birthday with his family, 96 or something like that. And he said that, he congratulated him, happy birthday and all that. And then the white man started to talk to him. And he said there's so many things in his life he regrets. And he began to tell him about how he was a firefighter, when he was working. And he said that back in the 60s and 70s, times were different. And he said it was very common practice, him included, he admitted to this, that there would be burning buildings, burning cars, or burning structures where Black people were in there, and they would pretend like they didn't hear their screams and not save them on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the last time that he did it, he went into a building to go get a baby, a Black baby. And he went in, he heard the baby screaming and crying, and he just stood there and came out and said, oh, I couldn't save him. And the young man said, for a second, I wanted to put a plug on his old behind, right? But then he came back and said, wait, of course they did. Of course they did. And it wasn't just him. This was the whole police department for years and years and years. Not just him, but everybody else in the fire department. They all hate us. It don't matter what field they're in. He was like, I knew police, people at the job, in every other area and sector, and in the hospitals. He's like, but you would never think that another human being would let another human being burn
in a fire,
hear their screams, and just stand there and let them die. But them people that's racist against us, God's children, the people that hate us, that have malice in their hearts, that have literally spilled our innocent blood on the ground, have partaken in that, have benefited from it, and have not repented of it, and still do it to this day, they're going to pay for that as a whole, as a race, their forefathers, what they've done, they're going to pay for it. But I know that we as Black people are very tired. We are tired. Those that have spilled our blood, innocent blood, they are marked as well. It's not too much longer now, y'all. And we may never see it in this generation.
Right.
We may never see it. My generation, even my kids, we don't know. So do not think or believe that all these people that you see walking and running around, riding their bikes, jogging without a care in the world, money, all of that was built on our blood and our bodies. It will be destroyed, and it will be repaid to us. But that's enough of my rant, y'all. We're tired.
We're tired.
As you've seen in the video, that is a little bit shocking to me, because I don't have the American experience, and I don't know if I'll ever have that. I don't know. But I really want to send love to you guys, because if that is the way that things used to be, and when I see on the news that sometimes it actually happens, or most times it happens, where you have to be scared to go out, you have to be always cautious by what is going to happen to you in the United States of America, it is a scary situation. So me hearing that back in the days, people would, I know there is slavery that happened, but to me as an African, I need to be really honest all the time when I speak about this. I didn't get that bad picture of slavery. if it makes sense, like that. I never got that ugly picture of the slavery that happened to, my ancestors or our ancestors. But like the fact that there are still people, old people in general, that are still alive, and they they did those horrible atrocities to people.
You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win.
Ain't no need in lie.
It's really sad. And of course, there's this thing, let's say in the African culture, where they say elders know more, or adult people know more, so they have more wisdom, they have more knowledge. But those people have a lot of secrets that they did in their time.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if they all spoke about them, you would be shocked.
Yeah.
So the fact that this man was celebrating his birthday, he's alive,
He celebrated
and
his
he left
birthday, his
a child
89th
to
birthday.
burn in fire, and now he wants to like kind of apologizing for it to a person that was not even related to it, knowing he left people, he left
Let
other
people
human beings to
die.
die.
Fires. How
Moreover,
long was
a
you a
child, he
firefighter?
went, like,
How many
guys, you
babies
had the
and
story.
old people
He
did
went
you
and
just
he
let
saw a black
die in these
child
fires?
in fire and left that child to burn to death. To burn to death. If that is not the most wicked thing anyone could ever do, I don't know what. I don't know what. And of course, like they said, why would we be shocked? Why would anyone be shocked? Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be even a shocker. They, of course, did. When I see the police in the way they police Black American people or Black people in the UK, it's really traumatizing to me to even visit those places. When I see how you're treated in like malls, or treated in shops, or treated just in general for existing in those Western countries most of the time, it is traumatizing to me, and I'm not even the one experiencing it. So I can feel for you guys, and it's really sad that this is the world that we are living in. But like the lady said, of course, I know, like, we know what to do as Black people. Of course, no one is going to give us freedom by just talking and making noise. No revolution has ever happened by just talking. Though I'm doing the same thing, of course, if I say something, someone can understand, and if other people say something, I can learn from them. So we know we need to reach that point where we have to fight, I would say. But it is so it's really sad, it's annoying, it's pissing that these people are still in existence, and they are celebrating life. Like, he was celebrating life, and it's not just him. There's a lot of people that probably did that. And I'm pretty sure it's in the healthy system, it's in the political system, it's in the education system, it's in the fire department. Of course, I did not expect that, but why would I even be shocked about it? It's in the police system, it's in every system. So we have a long way to go. And the fact that these people that did these atrocities are still alive is what is mind blowing and mind baffling to me. It is annoying, honestly. I feel sad, I feel bad, I feel angry. I don't know how to explain it. Like, why did he even have to come to tell this man about those atrocities? Like, was that apologizing? Like, hey, back in the days, I left a child to burn who was, of course, a person of your color, and yeah, I did some, pretty horrible things. What was the reason for him to tell those things to this gentleman, to this young man? Was he apologizing? Like, was that an apology? And what was it going to do for the young man? Because in
No, that.
actual sense, it just traumatized him. Is that how they apologize? They do the atrocities, and then when
Yes,
they grow
still.
older, then they want to reflect on it and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You only reflect on those things when you are about to die. Because, I mean, if he was 90, he's about to die. Come on. So he's apologizing because he's about to go. he never saw anything. He didn't see what was wrong with it when he was doing those things. And there's also another video, some white older woman who was asked on what she regretted in her lifetime, and she said, I wish I was more, I wish I was more observant to Black people. I wish I was more understanding to Black people. So they only reflect back when they are in the times of almost, dying. That's when they reflect, and they're like, they did horrible, tremendous things. I don't carry hate on anybody. Like, I don't even have to hate anybody. But like, the more you see these things unfold, it's just disappointing, and it just makes your blood boil. But I mean, what can you do but just, be cautious of yourself. And like the lady said, of course, time will come when they will have to pay for those things. And as the world, moves around, comes back and goes around, I know that we will go back to those times of greatness as African people, as Black people. It might not be my generation, like, the African American lady said. We might not be around, our children might not be around, but of course, time will come when things will be done right, when we'll be, back to who we need to be in our greatness. And yeah, that's something that I actually believe. And I know time will
I believe
come
it too.
when whoever, like, did stuff to innocent people, no matter where they come from, they will have to pay somewhere, somehow. Maybe, I mean, I don't believe in religions of God coming back and doing, hula magic. But I do know that when we start, changing and doing things that favor us as Africans or Black people, time will come when our descendants will enjoy the fruits of us. And then, of course, the descendants of other people will also see the wrath or the wrath of the things that their ancestors as well did to other people by spilling blood, if it makes sense. That was it for me today, guys. I'll see you in the next.
Well, I always be like, how can I get this? Okay, I remove this. Yeah, so that was a video of a brother who said he's a trucker, and on one of his stops, I suppose, he was at a restaurant, and there was an elderly white man, 89 years old, celebrating his birthday. And he spoke to the man, and they had a little chit chat, and he mentioned it must be awesome to have such memories. And the white man told him, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And he mentioned to him that he was a firefighter. And in the 60s and 70s, it was common practice. Everybody did it, to leave Black babies, Black elderly, the vulnerable, those who couldn't get out of trapped buildings and houses and cars and lakes and rivers, accidents. They would leave them to die, leave them in a fire. And this 89-year-old man, that was his regret. That's what he's thinking about. That's what's on his mind. And you know what? I'm on my ancestor's side. And whatever's waiting for him, whoever's waiting for him, all them babies that he left in them fires, I'm on their side. Yes, everything is being revealed now. And a lot of us, well, oh, he the sweetest white man. Oh, he the sweetest white man you could know. Yeah, he is now. Because he know that ass is finna face judgment. Sure is. And this right here, see, The whole thing is diabolical. If it was a white Jesus up there and a white God up there, they wouldn't be too scared to go up there. White folks wouldn't be too scared to go up there. They wouldn't be repenting, trying to tell us they sorry and what's going to happen for nothing. However, if it is a white Jesus and a white God up there, you know all that, them clouds is probably cotton. So as a people, we might want to go a little further than heaven. I don't know if we want to be behind no pearly white gates. I ain't with nobody. No, black people, black America, we might need to wake up and look at what's going on here. This stop right here, yeah, it's probably the stop of all stops. I don't know if you want to spend an eternity, as they say, with the same ones that's done hung, strung, lynched, roasted, raped, pillaged, traumatized, terrorized, literally skinned the meat off of our bones. I'm not spending forever and ever. I'm not spending my eternity. Emmett Till is not with Carolyn Bryant in no heaven. We got to start thinking. And white people, I don't know how y'all feeling, but y'all better start thinking. If you on here, you better. But I don't even want you on here because this ain't even to you. I'm sure y'all set up and your great aunts and great uncles. That man done told that story to so many of his family members. He's 89. How long was he a firefighter? 30, 40 years? So your 40, 56-year-old best friend, they all know this story. They all know. And they all know he is quiet as it's kept from y'all. They still doing it. They still terrorizing the black bodies. That man done lived to be 89 years old. He ain't thinking nothing gonna happen to him on earth. He thinking about when he die, what's finna happen to him for leaving all them black babies in them fires. How can you be a firefighter for 40, 50 years and you just walk out and leave black babies in the fire? And why come and tell us now? We can't do nothing. They the one said Jesus white, God white. But see, all that cosmic energy up there ain't got nothing to do with white people. All that cosmic energy up there ain't got nothing to do with white people. They better be motherfucking scared. Every last one of them. And that 89-year-old man, he done told his whole family about them stories. Leaving the black people in the building, leaving black babies in fires. They know about the black baby he looked eye to eye with when he walked back out. He 89. He got some family members he done told this story to that's 40, 50, 60 years old. They y'all friends. They all know this story. They all know every story that man done sacrificed a black life and left it in a burning fire. But for the love of black people, ain't nobody told you. Some of them family members feel the exact way he do. I want to be a firefighter when I grow up. I ain't no firefighter, but I'm a police officer. I ain't no police officer, but I'm a judge. You know, different professions give them that avenue. And white people, it ain't about y'all feeling uncomfortable no more. Because don't nobody really give a damn. Y'all asses done sit up here and let y'all whole damn clanimal ruin life itself. Humanity and mankind is at stake. The pets of the world, the people and the pets of the world, this planet, this plane, waiting on black Americans, black Indians to wake up. Yep. Everything is so tense and screaming. It's like one of them instruments with the strings, and it's so taut. That's how it is now, because y'all have sat there and let this whole grudge, this 500-year-old grudge, really is longer than that, I believe. But I don't know. I know awakening is coming again, and I know whose side I'm on. I don't know if y'all know whose side y'all on. I don't know who y'all scared of. Is you Black America? Is you scared of yourself, or is you scared of who gonna be mad at you? You scared of who's scared of you, or you scared of yourself? I don't know. I'm on my ancestor side. And all them babies, Emmett Till, George Stinney, Mary Turner's unborn baby. All the victims we just read about in Red Summer. Where's Red Summer? Oh, I'll put it back on the shelf. All them victims, I'm on their side. Oh, yeah, we're going to pour some libations, too. I still got our water right here. Let me refresh it. Yep, let me refresh the water. We're going to pour some libations. Yes. All right. Oh, yeah, this is Face the Nation with Bolden Unchained. Good day and gratitude. Good day to you and gratitude to the ancestors. Yes, we're giving libations to our ancestors who saw our freedom and made it happen. Yes. Mm. Ashe. Benjamin Banneker. Ashe. Soldier of Truth. Ashe. Frederick Douglass. Ashe. Isis. Ashe. Malcolm X. Ashe. Marcus Garvey. Ashe. Rosa Parks. Ashe. Martin Luther King. Ashe. Anna Bolden. Ashe. Brandon Holloway. Ashe. Eileen Collier. Ashe. Jesse Holloway. Ashe. Mary Pervan. Ashe. Southern the Truth. Ashe. Dr. John Henry Clark. Ashe. Isis. Ashe. Osiris. Ashe. Heru. Ashe. Anubis. Ashe. Goddess Neckbeck. Ashe. Bad. Ashe. Yeah, that video was, wow, something. Oh, I should have showed you. I have to set the plant up higher so when we're doing the libations, then you can actually see me pouring the water on the plant. And I just, call out the name of an ancestor and Ashe, pour the water on the plant. And we were on chapter 2, Racial Violence in Kentucky, 1865 to 1940. Why? After it had been clearly established that Hopper was innocent of the attack on Katie Anderson, why? After it had been clearly established that Harper was innocent of the attack on Katie Anderson, did the authorities and citizens fail to reopen the case? For one thing, it meant disrupting the word of the white woman. It meant disputing the word of the white woman, since she had publicly stated that Harper had attacked her. Furthermore, it is obvious that Bowling Green officials were unwilling to admit their mistake in allowing the wrong person to be lynched. Furthermore, it is obvious that Bowling Green officials were unwilling to admit their mistake in allowing the wrong person to be lynched. even though it meant that the real rapist, if Katie Anderson had been assaulted, avoided prosecution. Although it would have been a relatively easy matter to investigate and arrest the lynchers, the officials refused to do this as well. For the most part, that was not a factor when blacks were lynched for raping white women. Indeed, to suspect that a black was contemplating an attack on a white woman would have been enough to justify his lynching. Proof of this comes from the many instances of blacks lynched for attempted rape. The newspapers called these justified lynchings. Yet their own comments suggest that the intent of the rapist was not always known. The lynching of a black under these circumstances had to be viewed as a warning for other potential rapists, because usually the black had done little more than scare a woman or come up suddenly upon her. Cable Gadley, Cablegadley, Cable Gadley of Bowling Green was lynched because he crept up behind his employer's wife and contemplated an assault. One can imagine the impossibility of Gadley trying to prove his innocence. It was his word against that of a white woman. There's no way Gadley or any other black man could win that argument during the late 19th century. In February 1897, Robert Morton of Rockford, a small community near Bowling Green, was lynched, not for rape or attempted rape, but for writing a letter to Tommy Johnson, a white woman. The relationship, if any, between Morton and Johnson is unknown, as are the exact contents of the letter. Somehow, the letter, which Weiss described as insulting and insinuating, became known, and Morton was arrested. A group of men overpowered the jailer and took Morton to the edge of town, where they hanged him. As usual, the white newspaper justified the lynching by stating that the 21-year-old Morton did not bear a good reputation. 5 blacks were lynched for attempted rape in Logan County in 1886. The first lynching occurred in March, when 25 masked men broke into the Russellville jail and took Handy Woodward, Woodward, the man accused of attempting to rape a 12-year-old white girl. The lynching of Woodward met the approbation, APPROBATION met the approbation of the community. 2 weeks later, 3 blacks were lynched for attempting to outrage a white woman. Most of the details about that case are obscure. Her cries brought assistance, and the alarm being given, a posse followed and captured the fiends. A mob took the prisoners from the posse and strung them to a tree, where they are still hanging. On the night of April 28th, someone tried to break into the room where Daisy, Ida, and Ella Freeman were sleeping. The intended rapist had a drug that would make his victims insensible. Screams from one of his daughters awakened L.A. Freeman. Heavily armed, he and his son began an immediate search for the suspect. Below the window, they found shoe tracks that measured 12.5 inches. A report explained. This fact directed suspicion toward the Negro Meredith Jones, who was known to have the largest foot in the village. The tracks led directly to Jones's cabin, a circumstance that, to whites, was sufficient evidence to implicate Jones. The sheriff issued an arrest warrant, and Jones was detained in an adjoining community. Even though 4 blacks had been lynched in the small community, also for attempted rape, Jones was returned to Auburn. Predictably, a mob stormed the jail, but to their surprise, the officials refused to release Jones. The mob had to settle for shooting him in his cell. As usual, the lynching was more than justified by the black victim's alleged unsavory reputation. Meredith Jones was the most disputable character in Logan County He was a burly Negro, 6 feet 2 inches in height, and weighed about 200 pounds. His career had been a succession of crimes of more or less magnitude, and a large portion of his life was spent in prison at different times and places. There can be no doubt that it was his purpose to outrage the persons of the young girls after he had put them all under the influence of the drug. When removing a black rapist from jail, members of the mob shunned disguises in an overt demonstration that their actions not only was right, but also had the approval of the community. They were determined to punish the rapists and let other blacks know they meant business. In September 1897, 16-year-old Maggie Roberts was brutally beaten and left for dead. She somehow made it home and told her father about the incident. Within an hour, Raymond Bushrod, Bushrod, was caught and taken before Roberts, who identified him as the rapist. Bushrod was then placed in jail. 2 days later, on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of a religious revival, a religious crowd of some 800 infuriated people took Bushrod from the jail. The leader asked Bushrod to confess his sin, and he did so in a long and fervent prayer. He was then hanged at the courthouse. Some of these courthouses is still up. Yes. The leader of the mob made an address. Here's the protection we offer our wives and daughters. Apparently, the women appreciated the lynching. As the report explained, during the entire time of the lynching, not less than 200 women was on the hill overlooking the public square. And when the Negro's dangling form went up, their cheers rent the air. Even in cases such as this, in which the people involved wore no mask and conducted the lynching in public, officials still refused to identify members of the mob. Indeed, the coroner of Hancock County witnessed Bushrod's hanging and cut the body down 4 minutes after the black man was declared dead. Nevertheless, he rendered this verdict. Bushrod came to his death at the hands of unknown parties. Governor William O. Bradley was outraged by the lynching and the refusal of the coroner and other officials to bring the guilty parties to justice. Commenting on the Bushrod murder some 3 months later in his annual message at the state legislature, the governor noted, "In Hancock County, an open day and without mask or even the pretense of secrecy, a Negro was forcibly taken from the jail and hung on the public streets of Hallsville." The final step in the drama of lynching an Afro-American accused of rape consisted of the victim or a member of her family choosing the form of death for the rapist. Most selected a symbolic location, such as the courthouse or a tree where a lynching had occurred. Many lynchings were carefully planned. The materials for a burning were obtained even before the black person was in police custody. Damn! In cases of death by torture, it was customary to allow the aggrieved family members to inflict the first pain. In one case, a lynch mob in Fulton, Kentucky, was led by J.M. Morris, whose wife allegedly had been assaulted by a black man. Before the man accused of attempted rape could be carried away, Morris, in a fit of anger, shot and killed him on the spot in the custody of the authorities. Morris thereby cheated the community of a public lynching. It also meant that everyone knew who had carried out the execution. An inquest was held, and the jury returned a verdict of justifiable homicide. Two highly publicized lynchings occurred during the 1890s. In both cases, white people had openly predicted that the men accused of rape and murder would be lynched upon their return to the communities where the crimes had taken place. Without question, all lynchings were violent and brutal deaths, but these two proved to be especially so. Oh. The bodies of Mary and Ruby Ray Bernard. The bodies of Mary and Ruby Ray of Bardwell. Mary and Ruby Ray of Bardwell, Bardwell, was found on July the 5th, 1893. A medical investigation revealed that both girls had been raped before they were killed. The only clue was a blue coat left by the murderer, rapist. A search party was quickly formed. Out in the woods, two men fired at a distant, fleeing figure, but missed him. They agreed that the man was either a white or a mulatto. Bloodhounds tracked the fugitive to the Mississippi River, where the search party learned that a fisherman had rowed a burly yellow Negro across in his skiff, Skiff. A major breakthrough in the case occurred the next morning when a brakeman on a freight train in nearby Missouri encountered a black illegally on board the train. The black was arrested, having received a wire to look out for a suspicious light-skinned Negro. The authorities in Sikeston, Missouri, concluded that this was the man. They telegraphed to Bardwell that their prisoner had no coat, but wore a blue vest and pants, which would perhaps correspond with the coat found at the scene of the murder, and that the names of the murdered girls were in the rings found in his possession. The black man also had a pocket knife and a razor, both of which showed traces of blood. Upon learning of the capture of a black man, whites in the communities of Bardwell and Wickliffe, Wickliffe, openly stated that the man would be lynched as soon as he arrived in the area. A special train was taken by the victim's father, the local sheriff, and a group of indignant white people to help return the suspect from Sikeston, Missouri. Although they had no warrant for the prisoner's arrest, he was turned over to them. When he saw the man, the sheriff realized that he was dark-skinned instead of high yellow. The two men who had shot at the fleeing target disagreed whether he was the man. The gold rings found in his possession had no names in them, as they had been asserted, and John Ray said they did not belong to his daughters. Ray, who had believed up to this point that a white man had killed his daughter, did agree, however, that Miller should be taken to Bardwell. Meanwhile, back in Bardwell, arrangements were being made to burn the Negro fiend. So why would you take him back? Before being carried to Kentucky, the suspected black murderer / rapist gave a long statement trying to prove his innocence. My name is C.J. Miller. I am from Springfield, Illinois. My wife lives at 716 North 2nd Street. I am here among you today, looked upon as one of the most brutal men before the people. I stand here surrounded by men who are excited, men who are not willing to let the law take its course. And as far as the crime is concerned, I have committed no crime, and certainly no crime gross enough to deprive me of my life and liberty to walk upon the green earth. Leaders of the mob sent a telegram to the police chief in Springfield to verify Miller's statement. Several hours later, a message returned saying that Miller did not live in Springfield. That, of course, did not prove that Miller was guilty of rape and murder. Miller was put in jail when he arrived in Bardwell. He urged the mob to compare the blood found on his knife in his hand with that of the dead girls. but that report was never made public. By this time, a mob estimated at more than 5,000 people, many of them having come by special trains, had gathered outside the jail, waiting for Ray to choose the style of execution. Ray, still unconvinced of Miller's guilt, said that a burning should not take place. A hanging, he said, would be acceptable. Outer Wells Barnett gave this report. There was a loud yell, and a rush was made for the prisoner. He was stripped naked, his clothing literally torn from his body, and his shirt was tied around his loins. Someone declared the rope was a white man's death, and a log chain, nearly 100 feet in length, weighing over 100 pounds, was placed around Miller's neck and body, and he was led and dragged through the streets of the village in that condition, followed by thousands of people. He fainted from exhaustion several times, but was supported to the platform where they first intended burning him. The chain was hooked around his neck. A man climbed the telegraph pole, and the other end of the chain was passed up to him and made fast to the cross arm. Others brought a long forked stick, which Miller was made to straddle. By this means, he was raised several feet from the ground and then let fall. The first fall broke his neck, but he was raised in this way and let fall a second time. Numberless shots was fired into the dangling body, for most of that crowd were heavily armed and had been drinking all day. Miller's body hung thus exposed from 3 to 5 o'clock, during which time several photographs of him as he hung dangling at the end of the chain were taken, and his toes and fingers was cut off. His body was taken down and placed on the platform. The torch applied, and in a few moments, there was nothing left of C.J. Miller, save a few bones and ashes. In commenting on the lynching, the Mayfield Monitor described Miller as a notorious character who lived by crime. This statement proved to be completely unfounded. After his death, it was verified that he lived in Springfield, Illinois. Where he was a law-abiding citizen with no criminal record. 4 years later, John Ray called for reopening the case. Although he had consented to Miller's hanging, he had believed that a white man had been involved. Ray had facts that would incriminate a white man now living in Missouri. He is the son of a prostitute who lived in Mayfield about 25 years ago. The local police chief agreed with these recent findings, saying that he too had believed all along that Miller was one of 2 men who had committed the crime. It would have been impossible for Miller alone to overcome, rape, and then kill both victims, the sheriff explained. No records exist to show whether this white man was ever apprehended. Also, it is clear that no evidence existed that placed C.J. Miller in Baldwell on that day, the two girls was raped and murdered. Described by contemporary observers as the most horrifying lynching in the state's history, the murder of 18-year-old Richard Coleman in Maysville on December 6, 1899, brought together a number of the different aspects of lynching African Americans for rape. A family member of the victim selected the form of punishment. No one wore a mask. The lynching occurred in broad daylight. Local citizens knew well in advance that a lynching would occur, and officials took no step to prevent the lynching. James Lashbrook's wife, a beautiful, innocent woman, was raped and murdered in October 1899. After being questioned by the police, Coleman, who worked as a farmhand for Lashbrook, was arrested and charged with the crime. Fearing for Coleman's life in light of the highly emotional nature of the crime and the numerous lynchings that had already occurred in Kentucky in the 1890s, the local sheriff took Coleman to Covington for safekeeping. Eventually, the Maysville grand jury indicted Coleman for rape and murder and ordered him returned for trial. Relatives of the deceased woman had traveled to Covington to maintain a vigil at the jail where Coleman was being held. Upon being told that his case would be held in Maysville, Coleman confessed to the crime, begging to be executed in Covington without benefit of a trial. Coleman's fears proved well-founded when members of the Lashbrook family boarded the same train compartment with him and the sheriff for the ride back to Maysville. A telegraph telling of Coleman's return had been sent ahead to Maysville. By the time the train arrived, thousands of people, led by James Lashbrook, were on hand to meet the train. The crowd had already been warned by Lashbrook's family and friends. The crowd had already been warned by Lashbrook's family and friends not to shoot Coleman, that he would be given a slow, painful death. Even though he and his men were heavily armed, the sheriff saw his role as merely returning Coleman to the town for the mob to do with him as they wished. Oh. When he got off the train, the sheriff released Coleman to the mob when requested to do so. Lashbrook, at the sight of Coleman, told a friend that no power on earth could restrain him. A quick trial was held, with Coleman confessing to Lashbrook that he had killed Lashbrook's wife. The Cincinnati Enquirer contained the final proceedings of the trial. Mr. Lashbrook, we are willing to give you the choice of 3 things. What are they? Asked the excited husband. What are they? Asked the excited husband. He was excited. First, we would turn him over to the law. No. Second, we will hang him. No. Last, we will burn him. Yes. Men, shouted the spokesman, are you satisfied with Lashbrook's decision? What is it? Burn him. Yes, shrieked the mob. And the victim began to whine and pray for mercy. God, please don't let these people do this to me. God, please, Jesus, please don't let these people do this to me. Oh. The mob then took Coleman to the pier PYRE, which had been selected as the execution site several weeks earlier. Lashbrook set Coleman on fire. To the roar of the crowd, hundreds of people, from little bitty children who placed weeds around Coleman to the elderly people with their old ass, like that 89-year-old man, contributed to the fire. The newspaper spoke with approval of the heroic effort of an elderly woman confined to a wheelchair who slowly and painfully made her way through the crowd to add one little piece of wood to the fire. And that was heroic. The mob then took Coleman to the pyre, PYRE, which had been selected as the execution site several weeks earlier. They already knew they were going to lynch him. But they had the decision. Do you want to hang him, burn him, shoot him? And so Lashbrook set Coleman on fire to the roar of the crowd. Hundreds of people, from little children who placed weeds around Coleman. Little kids coming up placing weeds around the man that they done set on fire. Little kids. To the elderly people, little old people, like the 89-year-old man that just confessed to leaving black babies burning in them fires. They said we couldn't reach them. But anyway, this little old woman, they said she was a hero to them because the newspaper spoke with approval of the heroic effort of an elderly woman confined to a wheelchair who slowly and painfully made her way through the crowd to add one little piece of wood to the fire. The corpse was eventually dragged through the streets, and people cut off his fingers and they cut off his toes for souvenirs. Several newspapers wrote editorials about the Coleman lynching. Headline, burned at stake, Richard Coleman meets death at hands of a frenzied mob. The story in the Courier Journal said the lynching would hurt the citizens of Maysville, especially the youth. It was a scene the like of which probably was never witnessed in Kentucky, certainly not since the days of Indian warfare has there been a parallel to the 3 hours horrible work of the frenzied mob which tortured and burned the young Negro murderer, while thousands of people looked on with mingled exclamations of horror and approbation, and others turned away sickened by the awful sight. With its eye-catching headline, Negro Boy Roasted Alive in Kentucky. The New York World, with its eye-catching headline, Negro Boy Roasted Alive in Kentucky. The New York World detailed the lurid events and condemned the citizens of Maysville for not stopping the mob. Instead, when some new torture was inflicted upon the shrieking, burning boy, the crowd cheered and cheered. The shrill voices of women and the piping tones of children sounding high above the roar of the men. Oh, I don't know if I can finish this. Long and outspoken foe of lynchings, the New York Times suggested that a mass sickness existed among white people when punishing black people for certain crimes, real or alleged. And I think they all was alleged. Just making up shit. The murder by burning of the Negro Coleman at Maysville is an outrage so terrible and so shameful that it can only be explained as an outbreak of popular delirium. There's no question that Coleman would have been executed by the law, the paper noted, but it was due in part to the feelings that the penalty fixed by the law was inadequate to the offense, and in part to a wild and uncontrollable thirst for vengeance aroused by the most infuriating of crimes. The Times concludes with the most telling point. Underlying these motives and rendering them more savage was the mysterious and subtle and venomous race hatred instilled in the days of slavery. These motives in combination produce what must be called temporary insanity. Y'all, white folks ain't motherfucking temporary insane. No. That's who is motherfucking sick in the world. That's who done motherfucking destroyed everything. Must be called temporary insanity. And then we got the nerve to want society, everybody, to think that now you're okay. Oh, all of a sudden, that's not you. Oh, no. That was them. A long time ago, that could never be us. We could never do that, knowing you're a goddamn lie. No one involved in the Coleman lynching attempted to conceal his identity. The prosecuting attorney refused to file charges against Lashbrook and the other leaders. The county judge went a step further. I am a police judge, but for once, perhaps I forgot the duties of the office. Lashbrook has my sympathy. Although not fearful of arrest, Lashbrook announced plans to leave the state immediately after the sale of his farm, his livestock, and his farming implements. Governor Bradley sent a telegram to a leading lawyer in Maysville, asking for advice on how the state should proceed in the matter. He was told that the lynching had not been planned in advance, that the good people had acted naturally. Moreover, the lawyer replied, the good people of Maysville would not take kindly to any attempts to punish the guilty. Letting them know, no, you don't come over here trying to punish us for lynching somebody. And they didn't. Let's see. Although the public execution of blacks for rape received the greatest attention and most surely aroused the frenzy of the white public, more lynchings resulted from murder and attempted murder. Of the 353 lynchings in Kentucky, 103 or 29.1% were for murder and attempted murder. An obvious question regarding the lynching of Afro-Americans for murder is whether or not they had actually murdered whites or had merely defended themselves. Had trials been held, some reasons might have been presented as evidence to explain why a black had killed a white. Most criminologists seem to agree that murder, to a degree not found in other criminal offenses, often involves people who are equally at fault. From the end of the Civil War forward, blacks surely knew what penalty awaited them for murdering a white. Does this mean, therefore, that a significant number of the homicides of whites by blacks was really cases of self-defense? Admittedly, this is difficult to prove since the accounts of blacks being lynched for murder contain no court records, but come from local white sources. Not surprisingly, white newspapers and local historians have repeatedly stated that for unexplained reasons, blacks killed inoffensive whites. blacks killed inoffensive whites. Members of the mob usually wore disguises when lynching a black for murder. Why? Perhaps there were questions about the innocence of the murder victim. These lynchings usually occurred in the middle of the night, thereby avoiding the large public displays that seem to characterize lynchings for rape. In January 1886, Calvin Simpson broke into the home of Mrs. Graves in Henderson County. Awakened by the loud noise, Mrs. Graves and her two daughters fled the house. Simpson caught the older woman and beat her to death with a blunt instrument. He then broke into another house, but was captured by the authorities before injuring anyone else. He informed the police that God had told him to kill Mrs. Graves because of her refusal to pray. As the reporter explained, he feigns craziness, is desperate in speech and behavior, claims to have captured the devil and set the world free. Around 2 o'clock the next morning, a mob took Simpson from the jail. He reminded the mob that he had merely done the Lord's bidding. Before Simpson was riddled with bullets, a member of the mob said, "Up you go to the Lord." Clearly, the mob knew that Simpson was insane. Yet, to allow any black to kill a white was to set a bad precedent. Members of the mob also knew that public approval of their actions might not be forthcoming, so they wore masks to conceal their identities. In Lexington, around the 1st of January 1878, a black named Stiver, Stiver, a black named Stiver killed a white man for some unknown reason and was immediately lynched. Several weeks later, a white mob, sure that 3 other blacks had assisted Stiver in the murder, decided to lynch them. The mob first went to the home of Tom Turner, and shot him to death in the presence of his wife. Next, Edward Claxton, Claxton, and John Davis were taken from their homes and hanged in the woods near Brucetown, a small community on the outskirts of town. The New York Times reported the lynchings as part of its crusade to end the practice in Kentucky. In response to the Times story, a Lexington newspaper proclaimed that the murder of the white man and the ongoing involvement of blacks in criminal affairs had led to the lynchings. But the account of the Kentucky Gazette, like practically all others detailing the lynchings of blacks for murder, failed to explain why the white man had been killed in the first place. It is possible, for example, that the murder of a white barber by a black barber in Owensboro was motivated by a problem between the two men. On the evening of December 19, 1889, Doc Jones, the black barber, entered the establishment of John Westerfield. After a few words were exchanged, Westerfield shouted, "Doc, you are drunk. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Go away." Jones responded by cursing Westerfield, who then drew his pistol and slapped the black in the face. Jones withdrew, but returned about 20 minutes later and shot Westerfield dead. He was immediately arrested, but later that night, a mass mob took Jones from the jail and lynched him from the same tree that had been used to hang another black, Richard May, several years earlier. Some black men were lynched after killing whites over arguments concerning black women. In August 1890, John Henderson killed Gilbert H. Satterwhite, Satterwhite, a white farmer he had worked for in Midway. Shortly before the murder, Henderson's wife had been hired as a cook for the Satterwhites. Henderson came to Satterwhite's farm, and an argument broke out between the two men. Although although the sequence of events is uncertain, Henderson was shot in the breast, though not fatally, as Satterwhite was, as described by the white newspaper, butchered with a razor. His head almost severed from his body. If this account is correct, it is obvious that Satterwhite attacked Henderson first. After being arrested, Henderson was taken from jail to the edge of town and hanged. The very next year in Georgetown, James Dudley caught Frank Hughes, Hughes, his former employer, having an affair with his wife. Now, according to Dudley, a fight ensued in which he was severely clubbed in the head, but he somehow managed to shoot Hughes. Several white folks came forward with a different version. Dudley, in a fit of anger, had threatened to kill his wife and child, and she had fled to Hughes' apartment, which was in the same boarding house. Given the rigid segregation at the time, it is surprising that they lived in the same boarding house. Dudley followed his wife to Hughes' room and shot him dead. A mob of 125 masked men took Dudley from jail. Before hanging him, the leader of the mob said, "Nigger, your last day on earth has come. I'll give you a few minutes to say your prayers and to make a confession." Dudley then was lynched. There were cases of blacks being lynched by whites for the murder of blacks. In the small community of Warsaw, located in the Ohio River midway between Louisville and Cincinnati, the murder in 1876 of Lake Jones shocked the community. Ben and Molly French, whom Jones had befriended, were arrested and charged with the crime. They had attempted to rob Jones of his money. After several days in jail, the Frenches were visited by Judge Lynch. The reason for summarily carrying out the execution on the couple is obvious. Whites thought fondly of Old Lake Jones, who had served faithfully before and after emancipation, a prominent white man. He was, in the estimation of Warsaw whites, the biggest nigger in the country. As usual in the white version of the lynching, the blacks put to death were known throughout the neighborhood for their bad reputations. The Frenches were thoroughly disliked in the community, the paper noted, and Ben was a well-known chicken thief. Two lynchings, those of Ernest Humphreys, Humphries, in Princeton in October 1890, and Tom Holmes, Holmes, in Mayfield, Kentucky in February 1898. So these two lynchings were for the murders of their mistresses or wives. In both cases, whites justified the lynchings on the grounds that they were men of bad character. Taken as a whole, more lynchings occurred not for murder or for rape, but for other causes, including a range of alleged offenses from arson to robbery. This category of lynchings is often more difficult to define than its murder. What did white people mean when saying that a black was troublesome or a bad character? When looking at lynchings throughout the nation, some scholars have speculated that other causes could mean standing up for themselves against white people or being uppity, behaviors which, if applied to white people, would have been acceptable. One black, F. Brinkley, EPH, F. Brinkley, Brinkley, was hanged in Madisonville in 1897 for general principles. Several weeks earlier, a prominent citizen had been assassinated. And though no evidence linked Brinkley to the crime, his evil reputation made him a suspect. Given how whites often thought of blacks as comical and childlike, the labeling of a lynching as general principle seems to suggest a trivial offense. But to link a black man with an assassination and to then lynch him to avoid other assassinations shows that the person was far from being thought of as a comical character. It is possible that much more about the relationship between Brinkley and the murdered well-to-do white man was known by the mob. At the risk of making Afro-Americans accused of certain crimes seem heroic, it is possible that some offenses alleged to have been committed by them might have been their way of standing up to the man, of fighting back. Scholars of slavery have long pointed out that among the oppressed, there are many different methods, besides overt violence, used to express discontent. This may have been the case among Afro-Americans in the decades after slavery as well. Eli Nary, Nary, who had been arrested for barn burning, was lynched in Fulton County in March 1888. His motive for destroying the barn is unknown, but arson was often a tool used by the oppressed. That same year, Thomas Reney, Reney, was hanged in the Bowling Green area for poisoning 20 horses owned by Marion Sloss, Sloss. After a dispute over working conditions, Sloss had fired Reney, who had then vowed to get even. Although Reney ultimately paid with his life, the black man had indeed found a way to resolve the argument in his favor. At least 166 people were executed without the benefit of trials during the last 25 years of the 19th century in the bluegrass state. Instead of finding this inexcusable, most white Kentuckians hailed lynch law as a necessity because of an inept legal system that allowed recurring criminal activities. Moreover, to the protest that lynching was another form of discrimination reserved for blacks, that they could cite examples of white bad men, rapists, and murderers being lynched. A few instances did exist of whites accused of rape dying at the hands of lynch mobs. In July 1877, the body of Miss Burton, who had been missing for more than a month, was found in Point Oliver, Allen County, near the home of her brother-in-law, George Stark. The victim had been raped and shot twice in the head. Stark, believed to be on intimate terms with Burton, was arrested and placed in jail. He was taken out and lynched. The mob murder of Peter Klein, Klien, might be clean, was similar to that of many black men accused of rape. Arrested and charged with the rape and robbery of a farmer's wife in Newport, Klein was carried from jail by several hundred men. They took Klein to the home of the farmer for a positive identification. Then he was hanged. The lynching of Klein in a blinding snowstorm, the newspaper concluded, was a picturesque event. Even in the wintertime. Yet it is revealing of all the racial prejudice of that day that, as far as can be determined, no whites were lynched for attempted rape. The case against them had to be solid, and even then they might avoid the hangman's noose. In September 1887, 2 whites and 1 black were in jail in Flemingsburg on charges of attempted rape against white women. A mob broke into the jail and took the black, Charles Coleman. He was hanged from a railroad trestle. The 2 white men remained unharmed in jail. After the Coleman lynching, officials took steps to further safeguard the 2 whites, but in reality, the mob had already had its chance. Whites were far more likely to be lynched for murder than for rape. Most often, it was the kin and a few close friends who sought revenge for the death of a white murder victim. Several men were lynched after killing someone during domestic disputes. In Vanceburg, during the 1870s, Washington Lee shot and killed Robert Ellis because an intimate relationship existed between Ellis and Lee's wife. Usually, this would be grounds for a justifiable homicide. But the very evening of his arrest, Lee was taken from jail and hanged. In Paris, John Wynn, W-I-N-N, killed William Moreland, Mooreland, during an argument over Wynn's relations with Moreland's mother. When the mob came to lynch him, Wynn refused to leave peacefully and was shot in his cell. Austin Porter killed his wife during an argument in Grayson, Carter County, in June 1892. After a meeting with the county attorney, friends of Porter's wife agreed to allow justice to take its course if the trial moved speedily and was held in the same county. But upon learning that Porter's attorney would seek a change of venue and his removal to another county for safekeeping, the mob swung into action. Around 150 armed men came to the jail after midnight and demanded Porter. Despite his pleas for mercy, he was hanged from the railroad bridge. Whites were quick to lynch members of their own race for killing law enforcement officers. Allowing the death of the policemen to go unpunished, they argued, would weaken respect for the law. This position, of course, was highly hypocritical, since the very act of lynching reeked with disdain for the law. This position, of course, was highly hypocritical, since the very act of lynching reeked with disdain for the law. Judge Lynch came into town at 1 this morning and took the bench. His jury and officers consisted of 300 or more well-armed men. This account describes the lynching of Harvey and Joe Gillen on September 15, 1891, for the murder of the sheriff in Somerset. A similar story could be recounted for the lynching of O.A. Smith for the murder of the marshal in Elkton, Elkton, in 1889, or for the death of Oscar Morton in Beattyville, Beattyville, in 1894 for the murder of the sheriff. Although it was more by accident than design, a white woman was lynched in Kentucky. Appalled by the open illicit love affair between William Dever, D-E-V-E-R, and Mrs. T.J. West, a group of Marion County citizens went to the house where the couple was and ordered them to come outside. They refused to do so. The mob then set the house on fire. Dever came out and was shot to death. The mob shouted for West to come out of the burning harm, that no harm would be done to her. But she chose to perish in the house. The New York Times denounced the deaths of West and Dever as the latest example of the murderous lawlessness which goes unpunished in Kentucky. Going further, it added that the stolidity with which these avengers of the honor of the community withstood the pleadings of a child whom they were making an orphan does not belong to civilized life. Just as he had when other acts of lawlessness occurred during his administration, Governor Bradley condemned this incident, calling the lynching of Deaver and the cremation of West an outrageous and barbarous crime. On a few occasions, white people proclaimed that black law-abiding citizens applauded lynchings and took part in some of the mobs that meted out justice to rapists and murderers. In July 1882, Helen Brewster, Brewster, a 14-year-old black girl, disappeared from Belleville, Belle, Bellefield, Bellefield. She was last seen in the company of William Ritter, Ritter. Her body was eventually discovered, and the medical report revealed that Brewster had been raped prior to being killed. Ritter was arrested and taken to jail in Henderson. About 50 masked men overpowered the jailer, took Ritter, and lynched him. Most of the lynchers were Negroes, the paper noted. But the number of whites among them was sufficient to show that others than the murdered girl's race were determined to see her cruel murder avenged. And I just want to say to that right there that I did read that there was a murder in one of our black Wall Streets, I believe. And the black respected citizens of that town went and got the perpetrator, and they did kill him for the brutal assault and fatality of his victim. But with this right here, although black people did take this justice into their own hands, white people was not there for that justice being meted out. White people was there to see the glee and feel the glee of do what we do. Do what we do. That type of energy. Okay, where was we at? The white newspaper stated that several Negroes were among the leaders of the mob that took the three men from the jail and lynched them. According to one account, black residents of Maysville viewed the lynching of Richard Coleman and voiced their approval. Although it is possible that these white accounts of Afro-Americans taking place in lynching other blacks are accurate, they should be viewed with extreme skepticism. Numerous examples existed of whites attacking the black community after a lynching, usually for rape, warning the residents that others would die unless they mended their ways. Not surprisingly, fearing that the wrath of the mob might quickly shift to them, blacks remained away from the site of a lynching, coming to recover the body only after white people had left. Furthermore, as we have seen, most white reporters Most white reporters found comfort in portraying members of the mob as upstanding citizens, intent on punishing criminals and maintaining respect for law and order. With such a romanticized view of lynchers firmly etched in their minds, many whites, far more than the ones saying that blacks took part in lynching, were led to believe that Afro Americans could not have been involved in lynchings. On one occasion, the racist view of a white reporter led him to conclude that blacks lacked the capacity to conduct a proper lynching. When speculating on who might have been in the mob that lynched the Frenches for the murder of Lake Jones, the reporter at first said that all of the lynchings must have been Afro Americans. But upon reflection, he concluded the latter theory is hardly plausible if taken into consideration how promptly and in what business-like style the lynchers acted. The thing worked like a clock. Afro-Americans, and especially their leaders of the 19th century, realized that it would seriously hurt the race if they condoned the acts of black criminals. Yet, despite the assertions by some whites that blacks often applauded mob justice, in reality, they seldom, if ever, took part in lynchings. Instead, blacks consistently called upon whites to abide by their own laws and to give all of the accused, black as well as white, the right to defend themselves in court. Furthermore, all African Americans, regardless of station, knew that they could very easily be accused of attacking white women or be viewed as uppity for merely defending themselves against whites, thereby becoming the target of lynch mobs.